Welcome to the inaugural episode of the Projector Podcast. I am Jeremy Glowacki, Editor-in-Chief of Projector Central. On this week's podcast, Brian Nadel joins us from Westchester, New York, where he is a freelance writer and editor who specializes in technology reporting and reviewing. As a regular Projector Central contributor, Brian provides in-depth reviews of projectors primarily geared towards schools, businesses, and houses of worship. This week, we will discuss his most recent review of the Ricoh UHL3660 4K DLP ultra short throw laser projector, which is most notable for its high brightness as a UST. We will find out what he liked about the projector, what applications it is best suited for, and even some of its limitations. But because this is literally the first podcast for us together, we will also get to know a little bit more about Brian himself and how he came to being such a valuable and knowledgeable reviewer at Projector Central. Brian Nadel, thanks for joining us today. How are things there in Westchester?
It's my pleasure to be here, Jeremy.
Well, I know we're in spring training daytime baseball mode right now, so we need to wrap this up pretty quickly so that you can watch the Mets game a little later.
The Mets are playing in about 45 minutes, so let's talk quickly.
We'll keep it on track, and you know I love baseball as you do, and whenever I find a fellow baseball fan, I just feel like not to say we're a dying breed, but there aren't as many baseball fanatics as there used to be. There's a lot of different options out there for entertainment. And even if we don't root for the same team, I'm like, at least we're both baseball fans, it's a fun thing.
For me, baseball is very special because of right now when spring training is starting. The winter is still around. There's snow on the ground here, but you can think that it's going to get really warm really soon.
It is very comforting to see those Arizona and Florida, mostly Florida games, just warming you up a little bit, makes you feel better about things. Yeah, that's a good point. And hope springs eternal in preseason baseball, right?
Yep, every spring.
Well, if you're rooting for the Mets, I think you're in pretty good shape. I'm most excited about the Yankees' change in facial hair policy and seeing how that works out. But
I mean, that original Steinbrenner policy just goes back decades, and
it does.
It just was so strange. I never understood it.
It is silly, but
I mean, look at the before and after pictures of Johnny Damon like 8 years ago.
Oh, I know. I do love the Duck Dynasty reference, though. That was pretty funny. Just no Duck Dynasty beards. We're not doing that. So, okay. Well, since this isn't a baseball podcast, we'll probably need to switch gears into projector talk here. But I wanted to definitely touch on your background. We've just gotten to know each other recently as I became editor-in-chief at the start of the year, and we're still getting to know each other. But we both started in technology magazine publishing, and you're in the New York area, so same. I was there for 11 years myself. We didn't cross paths at those magazines, but tell us a little bit about your early days working as a product reviewer for some of the magazines there in the city.
So actually, my resume goes back a little bit further. I was a chemist for about 5 years.
Ooh.
Doing research, and decided it really wasn't for me and was a little too dangerous for me.
Okay.
And I went to get a graduate degree in journalism at NYU. They have a program for science writing. It's been expanded to include health recently, but it got me started in this business. Worked for several magazines. I worked for NBC Radio for a while. And I guess the first big technology magazine I worked for was PC Magazine, where at first I oversaw their computer review program, which is the meat and potatoes of the magazine, where every other issue I would do, anywhere from a dozen to as many as 200 computers. I mean, I'd have a lot of people helping me, but every word in there was a word that I read probably 10 times. From there, I went to Mobile Computing Magazine as the editor-in-chief and did that literally until the bottom fell out of the magazine business in 2001, end of 2001. And I've been a freelancer since. I've worked for, oh boy, just about everybody. Fortune magazine, Tom's Guide, Laptop magazine, you guys, CNET, um, anybody with a budget.
Mm-hmm. There
And
you go.
along the way, projectors and particularly business projectors became one of my specialties. Um, at first, it was just the portable class, and at that time, that was 6, 7 pound projectors.
Right.
That came in shoulder strap bags that you would, you know, carry onto an airplane. And now, they're down below a pound for some of them.
Right. Yeah, and obviously you've got runs the gamut with the lifestyle tiny projectors that maybe are just for fun for the kids, really, to really good quality business projectors like you mentioned, and the ultra short throw, which we're going to talk about today, which is creating a really good opportunity for.
Right, those micro projectors, the nano ones, actually, I think is the most vibrant part of this business. They're all solid state LED or laser illuminated. And they used to be 50 lumen or lux just because there wasn't enough light to call it a lumen. Now they're in the under 1,000 range. And, you can, if you have an apartment, you don't need a television on the wall. You just take the projector out, put it on the coffee table, connect it to your computer wirelessly, and it is the equivalent.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's jump into today's review, because what Projector Central really specializes in is a very in-depth review process, very detailed, very long written reviews, which I think serve a very good purpose for those who are doing those deep dives and really want to know what they're buying, especially on that business side where they may be buying in multiples and they want to get it right. Not that the home user wouldn't, but you're going to buy multiples of these things. They need to work. They all need to work, right? So how is it that the Ricoh kind of came across your desk in terms of a good one to check out? Was this something that Rob reached out to you, or my predecessor, Rob Sabin, or did you find this on
I
your own?
don't know how we started on this one, but from the beginning, it was thought of as being a very special projector because it is the combination of ultra short throw. I think its throw ratio is 0.24 to 1, which means it can be literally up against the wall and project a 5 or 6 foot image, plus brightness. Usually you get one or the other in an ultra short projector. You either get a short throw ratio or brightness. This one pumped out over 7,000 lumens, and it's extraordinary for this class.
So you received this projector. I I've had a handful of deliveries of projectors in my day, mostly for my own use as a homeowner. But what do you kind of remember getting? Was it unique in any way from an aesthetic standpoint when you looked at this thing? Do you just kind of dive right into it and start setting it up?
Well, the first thing I do is I measure it, even if it's a very exciting project and I want to get started quickly. I pull out the tape measure and the calipers, measure and weigh it, because that's the easiest thing to miss, and you can't trust the manufacturers on that.
I like that. Yeah.
Tend to lie a lot.
Yeah.
This was an odd projector because it was very long and narrow. A lot of USTs are like that because they don't have a standard circular lens at one end. It is there is a lens, a very heavily convex lens in there that's behind the glass window. So they don't really look like standard projectors.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we talk, just a little bit behind the scenes, we're going to reference visuals, and those who are listening are going to want to check out our video version on YouTube. But Alan, our producer, is going to edit in images from your review after our conversation. So folks can see what it looks like physically and in application settings, whether it's on a tabletop or hanging from a mount. So, and close up of the remote, which is always important to see. So you go through, you check literally, because we talk measurement, we were measuring brightness and throw ratios and things like that, settings, and you're talking about physical measurement, which that makes me laugh because I hadn't even realized that was a step you took, which I love.
For some buyers, it is the big question is,
sure.
So it can be expensive to mount these things, as you know. And if one person can do it rather than two or three, it is a big cost saving for a company or a church or a school. And it was even more the case when these were lamp powered, because every 2 years you'd have to have someone climb a ladder to change the lamp, maybe dust it off if you were lucky. So a single person installation is extremely important in this business.
And you mentioned the laser, so that is a huge maintenance, benefit in these applications, particularly, and it's a great performance piece too. But you want to talk a little bit about what some of the visual performance, the actual aspects to the brightness, the color, and all of that. Do you want to get into the modes? Where you want to go next with this?
No, that's fine. Let's talk first about the lasers, like you said. So this is a unique projector in that it has two diode lasers, blue diode lasers, and it has two independent paths. So if one goes bad, it will still operate. It'll be at half the brightness, but you won't have to replace the projector right away. You can limp through a presentation or a service or a class. Each of those lasers, they have a parallel path. They go to a color wheel that shines part of the blue light back as yellow. And then that's split up into red and green paths, so that if you put them all together, you get red, blue, and green. So you have white light that then goes through a color wheel that separates it out into red, blue, and green. And that goes to the DLP imaging chip, which is literally millions of tiny microscopic mirrors that point away or towards the screen based on what the image is. So the way it works is you've got these primary colors hitting the mirrors sequentially, and the projector's internal microprocessor is fast enough to move those mirrors around to create the images. It is as close to magic as you can get these days, just because it is, it's not an LCD screen, which is essentially a electrochemical reaction. This is an electromechanical one. And it's been around for 10, 15 years in the state that it's in, and it works extremely well. So this projector, it's rated, I think, at 6,500 lumens in its bright mode. It actually put out over 7,000, 7,161 lumens. But the bright mode, as is the case in most projectors these days that are laser powered, was overwhelmingly blue. And that is because the blue laser portion of it is the most efficient. And the rest the other colors are mixed in to denature it, to make it look more natural. So this would be good for presentations, for signage, for even digital scenery for a school play. But there are 4 other modes that are available, and this is typical of modern projectors. Some have as many as 7 or 8 modes. The standard mode and the natural mode look much better for showing pictures or movies. And oddly, this projector is one of the rare ones that doesn't have a cinema mode. And the cinema mode usually makes things look very, very warm because it's meant for a dark room. This projector doesn't have it, and the standard and natural are fine for movies and for photos. It has a vivid mode, as well that adds pink and purple into the mix, a lot of pink and purple. And you might use that for a signage application, maybe to make the image pop. It makes naturalist pictures just look like it's Halloween all the time. They are just ghoulish.
Yeah.
And then finally, there's a DICOM sim mode, and that is literally for X-rays. Hospitals, nursing programs, medical schools use it as a high contrast black and white medium.
Interesting. You know, what's interesting about the way you describe these modes, often the reviews that I'm editing for more residential applications, the brightest mode is typically kind of like almost to get the spec to the highest brightness.
Absolutely. And they lie about that as well.
This one, but there's no application for it in the home, though. It seems like it's so bad that you wouldn't want it in a movie or game, anything. But
I mean, it's only
what's interesting, you're able to find a reason for it in more the business application,
right?
Which is
its only use is for presentations and where just high brightness and contrast matter, because the colors are way off.
Another issue I've heard with the brightest setting a lot of times is that it kicks the fan on and becomes a noise issue. Was that a case with this brightest?
No, this was a fairly quiet projector. We've seen ones that are in the 50, 60 decibel range in the room that I tested in. This was 43 or so. It has two fans. Some of the really big projectors, the 50,000 lumen ones, will have 4 fans. And when they're all running, it's very loud, very annoying. But those are typically ceiling mounted in a high room or in a projection booth. So the only person hearing it would be the technician.
Mm-hmm. Whereas this, you don't want it to be loud because it's right there in the room and it's up close to the screen where most people are sitting.
The big thing about ultra short throw projectors for business and for schools and houses of worship is that rather than the projector being in front of the presenter, with the presenter in between it and the screen, so that you get shadows from the projected image, here the presenter is standing in front of the projector every time. So there's no light blinding them. There's no shadows on the screen. It is really sort of a unique way to put a person and a projected image together without any problems.
And as you mentioned, museum applications are becoming so common too, with these big immersive environments where they show like the Van Gogh exhibit and that type of thing. And those are also using short throw or ultra short throw style projectors to make that happen. So there's no shadows, right?
Yeah. And those sorts of setups use multi-projector arrays, 3 or 4, 6, 8 in a row, or sometimes stacked to get top brightness. So I could imagine this being used elevated maybe 20 inches, 30 inches from the floor. Sometimes they'll literally make a plywood box, paint it black, put the ultra short throw projector in it, and literally push it right up against the wall or the screen. And you would put them maybe 5 feet apart. And inside the projector is a way to blend the 2 adjacent images together. Mm-hmm. So it splits it up into 2 or 3 pieces, depending upon how many projectors you have, and then blends it together. It's a cool thing when it works. It's very hard to do. Very hard to do right.
Yeah. You mentioned, you talk about the 4K capability, and it's using the 4-way pixel shift. Do you want to talk a little bit about, for those who may not know, that's how this works on certain projectors?
It's an amazing technology that's actually working really well. It is a way to get a 4K, a 3680 image out of a 1920 native image. And what happens is, rather than the image target staying stationary. It's actually moved up and down, right and left on a 60 hertz schedule with these extremely precise micro motors. So while you're looking at that image, inside the projector, literally the imaging target is moving back and forth, up and down, as fast as the eye can see. And it uses the physical property of the eye called permanence of image, where you can't see things faster than about 60 hertz because it comes into your eye, hits the retina, and the chemical reaction that turns it into a signal in your eye is at about that rate. So it's how fluorescent lights that are actually blinking don't look like they're blinking. The first 4K emulated chips were not really that good. You would see some motion, flickering, and they would sometimes eat up some of the brightness. For this projector, it was actually rock solid and no difference in the projected brightness. So I think that technology has arrived. Other projectors that use LCDs do this also. Although sometimes, like the Epson ones, where it's 3 LCDs, it's an extremely complicated micro-mechanical setup because you've got to have 3 tiny screens that are synchronized. It's just very hard to do.
You also talk about the angle of projection and how versatile it is, but at the same time, there's no lens adjustment, so you have to pretty much position the projector where you want it.
USTs, they don't have zoom lenses and they don't have image shifting. So the way you size it is based on how far it is from the screen. And it can take an extra hour or two to set up versus a standard projector. And it has to be, before you start, absolutely perfectly level, or you're going to get keystoning artifacts that are going to be hard to get rid of. Now, every projector in this class has horizontal and vertical keystone correction, but the image shifting isn't there, and that it's a key problem. And someday the optical engineers will figure out how to do it, but at the moment, nobody does it.
But there is autofocus, right? That's part of one of the features.
No autofocus. It's all manual.
Okay, all manual.
Although this one, you can focus from the remote control.
Okay.
It's the little projectors, the micros and the nanos that have that, what is it called? Time of path focusing. That is surprisingly good. Better than I can do.
Right. And also there's a lot of talk about HDR, HDR10. You've got some of those options in here as well.
Yeah. No, this is an HDR10 projector. If you have material that's been encoded in HDR, it shows up much richer, much brighter. The highlights really pop. It's a secondary item in this projector because maybe it'll be used for like a movie night at a church or a school, but that's really not its aim. Mm-hmm. Its aim is being a workhorse, putting chemical equations on the board, showing the choir in a projection behind them, presentations on budgets, that sort of thing. Very rarely will the HDR be used.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I guess for the application that you're really focused on there in the commercial setting, what are some of the other features? You mentioned the HDMI 2.0 inputs and how those could be utilized in a space like that, which I thought was interesting in terms of connecting to other displays or
so imagine you're running a school's tech program and you've got a lecture hall that holds 120 people and you use this projector there and everything is good, but you have a guest lecturer or you invite someone to come in to speak, or even, a musical thing, and all of a sudden you've got 500 people who want to see it and hear it. The HDMI out port lets you send that to a flat screen or a projector in another room, including its audio. Now, you may want to use a different audio track, a higher quality connection, but it is a way to do an overflow room. It's also a very easy way to put a screen in a lectern so that the speaker can see what's on the screen without turning around to look.
Very good. Yeah. You mentioned audio. That's the thing that typically with home theater projectors, you're not really even thinking about, except for those the little ones that you need it all together. But here, it's very useful to have something you can actually hear, especially if you're like in a boardroom. So,
Absolutely.
how do you go about testing those?
So I have a sound system in my testing room that I connect to with just regular speakers. They actually are speakers that came from an in-wall application, so they are close to what you might use in that setting, and I connect to it. The interesting thing here is that a lot of those smaller projectors are including Bluetooth for that purpose, for connecting to a Bluetooth speaker set. I have not seen that yet in this class.
And you found that the performance was acceptable. What you
Yeah, I
tested
mean,
there with these speakers.
a lot of these projectors have a single speaker, and that's good for a small room, maybe 20, 30 people. When you get
Mm-hmm.
beyond that, to the big conference room, large classrooms, small auditoriums, small churches, you're going to need an external sound system, and it has a audio out plug to do that.
Okay. Can you walk?
Some of their
Okay.
competitors don't have speakers, but this
Yeah.
one does.
Okay. Uh, there's so much detail to what you provide in the article, and I encourage everyone to go read it if you really want to learn like the deep dive on what you've covered here. But can you just walk us through a little bit, just to give us a sense of all of the meters, the testing, the things that you use to do, to come up with your results for the article?
Mm-hmm. So just about everything in the review is based on either something I've seen and noted down or something I've measured. Very rarely is there an opinion or stated fact that isn't backed up. In fact, I'd be surprised if anyone found any of those. The first thing I do is, as I said, measure it. Once that's done, I set it up on, depending upon its focal length, either right next to the screen or probably about 40 inches, 60 inches, 80 inches, depending upon the lens. Um, Frame it, get it squared off, level, and then I start doing my brightness testing. That's always the first thing because it's the hardest thing to get right. So the ANSI lumen spec is 9 measurements. If you divided up the projected image into 9 rectangles of equal size, equal spacing, and then you average that. I use a light meter I've had for probably about 7 or 8 years, that is reliable, and I do it in each mode. Um, Ultra short throw projectors are kind of hard to get a good bead on their brightness just because the angles are hard. Because the light is coming up like this, bouncing off the projector, like off the screen like that, and it's hard. Sometimes you can get numbers that are double what it should be or half what it should be. So it's kind of a delicate process. So then I go through all the different modes, do the same thing. Um, at the same time, I also have the power cord connected to a power meter, and that gives me an idea of how much electricity the projector uses. Because some of these projectors that I look at get close to 2 kilowatts, about what a big toaster would use. So, and some of them are 220-volt
Yeah.
projectors, which are, out of what schools and churches and businesses usually use, but sometimes you don't have a choice.
Hmm.
Along the way, I do a sound measurement, 36 inches from the exhaust vent, um, to give you an idea of how noisy it is. Then, and this is zoomed all the way out. If there is a zoom lens, zoom in, and I repeat the tests because you want to know really what the zoom ratio is and how much light is lost. Sometimes a zoom lens zoomed in, like a 1.6x, can cut out almost half the light. And buyers don't really realize that. They think of the zoom lens as a way to efficiently frame the image on the screen. But if you're too far away and you have to zoom in a lot, it just eats up a lot of the image brightness. What else do? I do a color brightness test because the DLPs, because of their sequential lighting, um, generally register about 40% of a white bright um, reading. And that actually takes a fair amount of time. And I usually finish up with what's called a Bodner test, and it's a device from this man named Bodner in England, and it sends out a signal, a 60 hertz signal, and it has a little sensor in it, and measures the amount of time from when the signal is sent to when it's received at the device, and that gives you a lag time. And typically for these projectors, 40, 60 millisecond is good. If you wanted a gaming projector, you'd probably want something in the 20 range, maybe less. And then I basically go through the whole menu and try everything out.
And what size image are you typically trying to create for your test?
So I usually do about a 96 inch, an 8 foot image. 6 to 8 feet is normal for me.
Okay.
Um, some places, like a church might have a huge screen for something like that. But
Yeah.
that's about the size. That's about the size of the room that I have.
Okay. And but this one is rated to go up to 160 inches
Yeah,
diagonally. So
yeah. It'll
it's really
do
big.
what is it, about a 13-foot diagonal.
Hmm.
A lot of times, read that spec with several grains of salt because generally at that point the image is fairly washed out. And if you're in a
Sure.
room where the lights are on, it's gonna not look very good. So I've seen ones that, say that they can do a 12-foot image, and 8 foot is really about as big as they can do.
Now let's talk as we kind of hit toward the end here. The price is listed at 6,000. You feel like that, compared to what you've talked about with reviewing other projectors in the category, that this is a good range for it, or
Well,
a little high?
as I said, it's such a unique projector because of its brightness. So there's a Panasonic ultra short throw with similar specs, but it tops out at 5,000 lumen, and that's $4,000. So a
Okay.
little less bright, quite a bit cheaper. The only way you can get to 6 or 7,000 lumens for an ultra short is to get a medium venue projector like an Epson um, EBPU family. And there's the 1007B that is 7,000 lumens. And get one of these, they are totally bizarre lenses and they're really expensive. The light path goes out of the projector, up over the projector to the screen, like a periscope.
Mm-hmm.
And the lens alone costs what this projector costs. They have two that have slightly different throw ratios that are $7,000 and $14,000. So if you took that route, you'd be spending $15,000 to $25,000 to essentially get similar performance. So this really is a unique projector, and I suspect its competitors will up their output to meet the standard that they've set.
Now, we didn't really talk a lot of cons even in the written article, or negatives, which is great. I like positive reviews. You just mentioned a couple of things. Do you want
Hmm.
those just to make sure we're being
So one of the things that schools look for these days, I don't know if businesses do, is so there's a new ultra wide format for Teams, the Microsoft video conferencing software, and it's a 21 by 9 screen. 21 by 9 is like just a narrow window.
Mhm.
This does not do that in its native mode. You would have to go to like a 16 by 9 and then lose some of the image in a letterbox.
Mhm.
I think over time, more projector companies will use that format because I think businesses like it because you can put a bunch of video images side by side,
Yeah.
and it makes the video conferencing work better. So we didn't talk about networking.
Yeah.
So this projector is fully networked with wired Ethernet. It is gigabit per second, and it has both for infrastructure use and for video. It has HD base T.
Mhm.
What it and it has Wi-Fi built in, but the Wi-Fi only works with Miracast, which is a wireless um, way to put a screen from a notebook or a tablet onto the projector easily. A lot. It is a missed opportunity for Ricoh, I think, not allowing the Wi-Fi to be used for other things because there are some schools that don't have wired infrastructure for the entire building. So
Mhm.
there are these internal screens within the projector that you can get to from a wired connection for turning them on and off, checking the specs, seeing how long it's been on, even turn them all off at night if you wanted to. You can only do that with the wired Ethernet. You can't do that with its Wi-Fi. And I think that's an opportunity missed for them.
Well, overall, it's a very positive review. Definitely stands out from the crowd. I think folks will be really interested in it if they're looking for that high brightness, uh, you know, ultra short throw option. Any closing thoughts you want to touch on before we go? Because I think we've covered a lot of the main points that you covered in the article. And again, folks can deep dive in that at their
Yeah, so
leisure.
I got to say that I enjoyed working with it. It was a surprising projector. I thought it was going to just be mundane, boring, something that a business person would like to get and just not think about again. It turned out that the 4K imaging was rock solid, really good. I'm always impressed when a manufacturer understates their brightness because so many overstate it. And that, it just caused me no problems. I've had projectors that just are, a nightmare to get reliable, repeatable numbers out of. This one, it just works.
Well, that's great. I really appreciate it, Brian. Thank you so much for kicking off our new podcast with us today. It was a pleasure talking to you in person, sort of virtually here, and really getting a more personal sense of your process and the review itself. And so, really encourage everyone to read your writing on it. It's very thorough as usual, and find out more about the Ricoh UHL3660. Thanks again. Great talking to you. Enjoy that baseball game today.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Thanks.
Brian Nadel is a freelance writer and editor who specializes in technology reporting and reviewing. He lives and works in the New York City area and has covered topics from nuclear power plants and Wi-Fi routers to cars and tablets. You can read his full review, as I said, of the Ricoh UHL3660 UST projector at projectorcentral.com. A direct link to the story is available in our show notes. And that wraps up today's show, which was produced by Projector Central with technical assistance from Pretty Easy Podcasts. Please subscribe to the Projector Podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify. Also, check out all the latest Projector product news and reviews at projectorcentral.com, where you can also subscribe to receive links to our latest articles on the day that they are posted. For Brian Nadel, I'm Jeremy Glowacki. Thanks for listening.